welcome to a spooky Halloween special edition of the Hit or Miss Big Screen podcast. If you've been keeping up with our social medias or you've checked out the thumbnail, you will know that for this special Halloween release, we are going to be reviewing, appropriately enough, two movies called Halloween. The first, John Carpenter's original from 1978, and the second, the sequel to that, which bizarrely is also just called Halloween, but from 2018, by David Gordon Green directing it. And just to give you a little tiny bit of backstory, first of all, I'm not on my own. I'm being joined. I'm Mike, of course, and I'm being joined by Will as usual. So your two main hosts are here. Say hello, Will.
I really hope this episode is a thriller as much as the setup was. It was really horrific.
Indeed. So just to fill everybody in on the backstory of this, I am the resident expert when it comes to all things Halloween, the movie franchise, because I've seen all the movies. Some of them way more than others, but I've definitely seen all of them. Fan of them all, I would say, but especially love one or two of them that we'll get into. Will has not, or previously had not seen any of them, but I did ask him to watch for this review just the 78 original and the 28.
If I was literally going into this review blind, it would make for a very good review if I hadn't watched it, would it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But no, Will has watched the two things we're reviewing, but doesn't really know anything else about the overall lore or backstory or references therein. So I will try to mention them in passing, but obviously they won't necessarily mean anything to you if you haven't seen the whole franchise, which, it's good enough, I think, on its own to warrant a watch. But regardless... what it is, basically, as I said, we're going to review, first of all, Halloween 1978, the John Carpenter classic. We'll get into probably straight after that a little bit of some audience interaction regarding that movie. Then we'll give our conclusion and score, which is always out of 5 stars. Then we'll discuss Halloween 2018, back and forth, and then do the same audience interaction and conclusion. And hopefully that shouldn't come to too long. But just as I say, a special Halloween treat. So do enjoy it. And yeah, we'll start things off, I believe, with John Carpenter's Halloween 1978. Let's just say that this movie is something that it means quite a lot to me personally. I think it's got a well-deserved reputation. And just in case you are unfamiliar with it, basically the quick summary in terms of what I can give you is that basically the movie opens with a 6-year-old boy murdering his sister, and then it quickly flashes forward to around 15 years later to Halloween 1978, when the same now adult man stalks various babysitters and things around where he lived in the town of Haddonfield, Illinois, and goes on a murderous rampage. And that's more or less all there is to it. The movie within itself opens with what I think are some really cool evocative credits. The blocky orange text with the little jack-o'-lanterns, but it's all hauntingly lit against just pure black, and it's got that really cool John Carpenter music, because he did the music for the film too, which I really love. To me, it's just it feels like Halloween is these credits. It's really cool and sets the mood.
I think the music really aids that. The music is fantastic, and it does feel like Halloween. It feels like, of course, in the context of the movie, it feels like murder music, like ooh, eerie. But to me, this is, if Halloween was a soundtrack, this is what I think it would sound like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the same with, like I said, the visuals and everything, that they really work. I mean, I know they're just regular credits, but for me, they set the tone for the film to come really well, because it is a piece that's quite about atmosphere.
I mean, it's lit very well. Like, it goes to the eye as well, and then it goes complete black, and then you just see the orange of the nose and the eye. Yeah, it's very beautiful.
The slow zoom in is really cool as well, yeah. But the other thing I wanted to mention while we're talking about credits, though, is that although we call this movie John Carpenter's, and, it is directing-wise his. So, yeah, I did want to give a shout-out in terms of while we're talking about the credits to the late, great Deborah Hill as well, who is basically the co-creator of the franchise with John Carpenter. She doesn't get a whole lot of credit, and I think it's worth pointing out that she did kind of co-write the movie, and even Jamie Lee Curtis herself has said she's a huge part of the character of Laurie Strode. She's kind of the inspiration behind it, and she's a lot of what she brought to the character and what she was on the page. So I just wanted to quickly mention her before we carry on any further, because this is where her name comes up in the credits, so it made the most sense to me. So that's basically, like, you don't get these nowadays in films, but that's like just a credits that leads you into the movie. So then we get the very first scene, of course, which, as I said, takes place in 1962, I believe, something along those lines.
I remember this better than you. It was 1963.
63. Well, I knew it was 15 years.
I remember that because it was Doctor Who's start year, so I remember.
There we go. But yeah, so basically, as I said, I like the fact that it puts you in the point of view of the killer, even though it's only a little boy from the start. And this is something that, although Halloween wasn't necessarily the first slasher, there were films that came before it. They were almost all about like voyeurism and, putting you in that place. So I think that's a deliberate decision by Carpenter and everyone involved in the direction and the staging of it. And again, like the sort of what slasher films would become, there's an argument that, of course, that it's all about punishing your transgressions. So naturally, it opens with Judith Myers, Michael's sister. In quite a sexual situation. She's basically not as interested in kind of babysitting or anything. She's off with her boyfriend. They sneak upstairs. So I think implication there is quite clear. But it's also clear that Michael Myers, this is the first time he puts on a mask, even though it's just a clown mask that they were playing around with.
It must have been an incredibly quick shock. They literally went upstairs. The kid just walks into the house and then he's just leaving again.
We don't know what specifically happened, but in any case, we're not going to hang around and wait for like ages in a movie-wise. But yeah, movie logic. It
happens later.
Yeah. In any case, though, it's nice that I really love the touch that even as he puts on the mask, the camera is covered by the mask, so we now only see through the holes of the mask because we're still in the killer's POV. Which is a really cool touch, and it also prevents it from getting too gory because you don't necessarily see a whole lot of the actual stabbing. Other than to know that it's basically in the woman's, breast, shall we say.
I know they couldn't probably show it as explicitly as possible, but it would have been better than what we did see, which literally was just like a pan up to the right. To me, it wasn't well done because he's looking up to the right and the knife is so high up, like the camera is panning up towards the top of the windowsill. Yet he's only a little boy and then she's sitting down. So it would make sense if he's like the point of where the camera is pointing and the height of the knife. First of all, it implies that he's not small. Second of all, it implies that he's just stabbing middle of the air because she's not that tall. She's on the seat, so I don't think it's well done in that respect at all. And why is the kid outside in the first place? Why was he outside?
What do you mean?
I mean, we start the movie with
he's
him outside.
Outside. He's outside because the implication is it's like Halloween night and people are out trick-or-treating. And like I said, his sister was probably supposed to be babysitting but wasn't as interested. So she was like, yeah, just go play outside because I'm horny or whatever. But no, I have to disagree with you on that. I think the way it's staged is really good because it isn't... This movie, particularly for its time, isn't really about like gory, straight up showing you that kind of thing. And if you compare it to things like, for example, the shower scene in Psycho, where it is just basically... It's all implied. It's like you see a knife plunge down a few times, then you see blood. It's not, explicit. But in this case, you do actually see the aftermath and everything quite clearly enough when sort of Judith rolls over and she's, covered in blood and has clearly been stabbed. But I never really found it particularly, bad or poorly staged in any way. Regardless, though, anyway, that basically ends with Michael going outside and the camera finally switching us away from point of view to see that it is just this little boy.
Which was an excellent twist. I've never seen this franchise before, so just being exposed to that for the first time was incredible.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to really capture the impact of that once. Like me, you've seen this so many times, but I would imagine...
It took me by surprise because of how it was shot. It implied that he was tall, but apparently not.
No. I think it's more like the knife was just raising up and whatever else. But yeah, it could also have been, I guess, a mislead or what have you. But anyway, obviously, clearly this boy there was no like grand plan or anything because he just walks outside and is immediately got as it is by his parents that are coming back home and see what's happened. And obviously, as the movie makes clear, he just ends up in a sanitarium for the next 15 years and doesn't speak another word. So, there's no real... But I kind of like that that's kind of... It's better than trying to give Myers, for me, and this is a debate that'll go back and forth, but it's better than trying to give him motivation and like a reason for all these things. I think it's scary that there is not necessarily a reason and it doesn't go into it.
I'm just going to say, like, this franchise is like 20 movies strong or something like that, and I know only a couple of canon nowadays. However, surely there's got to be one that actually kind of delves into.
There is. I was just going to say, but that's the thing. That's what makes it divisive. Rob Zombie, when he remade this movie in 2007, which is literally a remake of this, he spent the entire sort of first half an hour dealing with the backstory of Myers as a young boy and how he used to enjoy torturing animals and he had an abusive relationship with his parents and stuff. But to be perfectly honest, I think that's really weak. It ruins any sort of, well, this is just a meaningless kind of just evil shape chasing people and you don't have to have motivation for it. You don't need to know that he was a psychopath as a young man and what potential reasons there is for this, because it defeats the point of even Loomis saying that there's nothing behind his eyes. It's just pure evil. So for me, again, that's way more effective and more scary. But there is, I guess, debate about that with some people. Some people that love the Rob Zombie film would say, "Oh, it's great that it gives you that bit extra." Personally, I don't think so. I think it's not needed.
It's a bit of a trope that, if there's a character in a franchise or whatever that's slightly miserable or unhappy, then suddenly they've got some tragic backstory. So it doesn't go into that as much, at least.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sort of points out that he's a bit like that, but then, as I said, it does seem a little bit like at times the movie is trying to find justification for it. And it's again, that defeats the point. There's not really, like I said, I see the character, this has been said by other people, by the director and stuff, but the character is meant to be like a force of nature, for example, the shark from Jaws or like a hurricane or something. So it's not about what's the motivation behind it so much as just this thing is going to kill you and you need to get out of the way, which makes it way more effective than just, let's see if we can appeal to his psychological weak point or whatever.
And it is kind of delved in the 2018 version slightly by, can't remember the actor's name, but I'm sure we'll touch upon it later. But that movie does try to take a more philosophical route with the whole psyche of Michael Myers. But I agree with you that, what do you mean?
Well, it does, but I think the whole point is that that's a big mislead, because at the end it just sort of points out, there's nothing. I'll get into it when we talk about that specific movie, but ultimately there's no motivation there or anything. It's all just other people are pointing Myers in specific directions that they want him to go, and he's just okay. So people aren't really he's got no motivation. He's just doing whatever's other people are pointing him and he's going in the route, whatever forward direction they point him, which again, I kind of like that, but again, we'll get into that later. But speaking though of the sort of future movies and stuff, I do, when I watched this, because I just rewatched this for about the 100th time, just a day or two ago. And it was interesting watching it after watching Halloween Kills, which I won't get too much into because I know, Will, you haven't seen that yet, and we're reviewing it later.
We are going to be reviewing that in a few weeks' time.
We are reviewing that later, but watching the scene of Donald Pleasance, Loomis' character, and his nurse go to the sanitarium where Myers has escaped, there's a good couple of shots there, including the exact same actress and character, which are mirrored in Halloween Kills, which I mention here because that happens in 2018 as well. So I think it shows that a lot of the staging and kind of how iconic these shots have become really work well for their atmosphere. And again, it's done in kind of the dark, and it's the nervous tension. The music's the same. It starts off slowly, and then you get the gradual build-up of, since when do they let the patients just roam around outside? And
you see, that's a great line, and the whole sequence leading up to the gate is really freaky. It reminded me of the Ward Enough in Time with the Cybermen in the white sheets, and it reminded me of that because they weren't really in focus in this film in Halloween, because they were in fields, and because of the lighting, you could only really see the clothing.
Yeah. Well, they weren't the focus. Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah, and the thing is, that was really good, and I loved it. But then we actually got to the car scene, when they're actually on top of the car. And first of all, the sound design, I really liked.
There's one moment I didn't love where it goes a little bit. There's one cartoony noise as Myers jumps up, but that's about it, and it's excusable.
Yeah, but the only kind of little moment in that is the bit where one of the patients, or it might be Michael. I
think it's Michael.
Oh, okay, but it smashes the car window.
Yeah, that's Myers.
That's the only bit I like in that little.
That's definitely Michael Myers. You're supposed to, like, when it comes to the car, it's him that specifically jumps on it and then steals it to make his escape, because you can see, like, he leaves the nurse. But talking about that scene, I wanted to shout out Donald Pleasance, who is brilliant throughout the movie. But it immediately starts off with, again, setting you up for the perfect kind of atmosphere and tone for the movie when the nurse is calling him kind of heartless, because he's like, well, I don't believe he should be ever let out, but it's the law. But I'm telling you, this just pure evil, this guy. There's nothing else there. And then even to the, like, exasperated once he's escaped in the car and he's like, it's gone, the evil has left this place. No one is safe, kind of thing. Which I think that's a performance that's really good and you kind of need in these kinds of movies, which I do think a few of the sequels kind of lack. That's just my personal opinion anyway.
I mean, I haven't seen him, so I can't judge.
Well, I mean, Donald Pleasance is in the first few in that role, but then, as I say, I'm thinking like Halloween 2018 doesn't really have that character, and I think it could benefit from it a little bit, maybe.
I mean, didn't he pass away in like 95 or something?
Yeah, he did, but again, we'll talk about it later. What it does with his substitute, I don't agree with, but that's a different movie for a later point in the review today. But yeah. I did want to say here as well that I personally just love the music. I can't get enough of John Carpenter's theme. I think it's really good. Even though I know other people have issue, and I know you've said it kind of gets overplayed.
It absolutely gets overplayed. I don't know when you were watching it if you kind of looked out for it, but every single time there was a transition scene between locations, and it didn't really cut from one to another straight away. There was also like always like a car moving with Michael in to like go to different characters, and every single time the music played, and that happened every 10 minutes, and I just thought, for God's sake. And the thing is, if you're going to play it, at least have some kind of payoff. But there are multiple times where we just saw Michael stalking them, which is fine, but we see it about 6 times, and it begs the question. Well, it doesn't beg the question because obviously there's an answer, but why did it take so long to actually get to the action and the killings? Because there's a lot of misleading moments. It's like, oh, this is going to be the time that it happens, like when the friend goes into the laundry room outside, and then that whole sequence is like comes to nothing. And I just think, oh, that's an extra 10 minutes down the drain.
Well, this is where we also have a massive disagreement, because that's the point. It's building up suspense.
Oh,
and it's kind of...
I know. I said it begs the question, but it doesn't, because it has an answer. But I don't appreciate it going on for so long, because you have about 4 instances of that throughout the movie where it could have got going, but it didn't.
See, I do appreciate that. I think that's what makes kind of the movie for me, because I think the point that the music is, like I've said before, it's kind of like the music when you know the shark is about to attack in Jaws. And it gives you like a Pavlovian response, because you're waiting for something to happen. Because I think the music it makes you tense anyway. It's that kind of music that is kind of, you know, your teeth are on edge listening to it or whatever anyway. So you're waiting for something to happen. And then after a few times, the whole point is it lulls you into that false sense of security, because you're like, after the 3rd or 4th time when nothing has happened, I think you're maybe starting to relax, even though the music is eerie. And that's why it's such a shock when it does happen.
To be honest.
Yeah. Well, again, that's different generations, I suppose. But maybe I like the fact that
now I know what's coming, because first time I didn't know what to expect.
I think it would be better first time. That's the whole point. Like I said, it basically lulls you in with like something's going to happen. Oh no, you're safe. And then once you think you are,
like 40 odd times, but you still think it's great or whatever. You think?
I think it's just masterfully done.
I think it's better than me, better than what I think of it. Like you've watched it many times, so I don't think that holds up. Like first time is going to be the best. Like I hope I rewatch and prefer it.
Yeah, fair enough. But I mean, like in terms of the impact for what I think the director and the filmmaking side of things was going for, I think the whole point is that it's more frightening and scary and tense when you don't know what's going to happen when, perhaps. But regardless,
but quickly, I did mention in my review, and it'll be in my conclusion later when I read it out, that often I was filling in the blanks a bit because I got myself worked up quite a bit because, you know, I'm a wuss. I haven't mentioned this on the recording, but I hate horror films. I don't hate how they're made, not at all, but I just hate being scared because horror films really scare me. And with this, yes, for me, it's a negative that it does take a long time to actually get to the murder, because it's a 90-minute film, but you don't have the main antagonist doing anything until the final third, which I don't really appreciate. However, it did make me scared many times, and I think that made the payoff especially when Jamie Lee Curtis is in the house at the end, and then all the bodies are slowly revealed, well, quickly revealed, to be honest with you, in different areas of the house.
Yeah.
And then it just made me think, holy crap, there were a handful more deaths in this film, but they all happen in the final half hour. So that's why I think the final half hour is terrifically excellent. And the way the director kind of led up to that point, I have issue with, but it did make the end rewarding, I would say. So it did its job in that perspective, which you did mention there. So
we'll talk about the ending when we get there. I think we're in agreement with there, but I think we're also vastly in disagreement about the build-up, which I'm kind of that's more what I'm focusing on at this point before we get there, because I think there's a lot there, and I do like in terms of like getting back to where we were, because it's quite a little bit further back. Although it doesn't make it like explicit, like we'll stop from miles of exposition. It does actually explain where Myers gets the overalls, the William Shatner mask, and the that Judith Myers' tombstone is missing, which would become important later. So that's nice. Yeah. I've mentioned already, like I said, I love the little Myers stalking the girls thing, and I've mentioned why. There's another trope here that comes up, which I don't love in horror movies, but I guess I don't mind because it's a necessity at this point, which is the sheriff and everybody like, oh, there's no real danger, it'll be fine, until eventually, shit hits fan, and then they all immediately regret, oh crap, there is something serious here. I do like, as I said, Michael sort of stalking Annie and hiding behind the bushes and that kind of thing. And this, not to sound like a complete psychopath, but I like that Michael even kills a dog at this point to kind of show you that like nothing is sacred and everything's kind of like all bets are off, because that would never normally happen. It's like in a movie you could do what you want, but don't kill the dog. But like Michael is just that animalistic and
psychopath evil. Michael is back, guys.
But yeah, and this is where you get young Tommy, whatever his name is, Tommy from the movie, seeing Michael and declaring that he's the boogeyman, and he looks like the boogeyman and whatever else. And again, I like that because it's great tension and build up. And again, we know the audience that Tommy has seen this and he's telling the truth, but the other characters don't necessarily. And this is when you get Annie being killed in the movie, the sheriff's daughter, I believe. And she's killed because she dumps the girl she's babysitting with Laurie, and she's heading off to meet her boyfriend. And then she gets strangled in the car on the way there. So again, it's the whole punishing transgressions thing. Which again feeds into the next one, because that's when Linda and Bob arrive in what would have been the house where Annie is, which they've arranged to obviously have like a bit of a meeting in. They find the place empty, and then you get the gratuitous sex scene that I think has become a staple of these type of slashers. So that's when you get to see if you're into that kind of thing, you get a Linda topless scene and gratuitous things.
Full well you're into that stuff.
Not hugely, but that's again it's a trope, and it's what kind of happens with the genre, and it's but yeah. So then, as I said, not only do you have like the gratuitous sex scene that they're punished for, but also it's when Bob goes to get a beer, alcohol, and that's when you get what I think is one of the more iconic killings in the movie. So as you said, it's the kind of the first time that I think it's really ramped itself up to this level, and you get him like pinning Bob to the wall weirdly, like partway up, which is really cool. Then you get him like imitating Bob with the sheet and his glasses to kind of look like a ghost, and do that kind of fake out thing of Linda being like, oh, what are you going to do? And then eventually getting killed for her own stupidity and transgressions, probably. Which again, this is when the movie's stepping up, I think, into the next gear and giving you the killings that you've perhaps been expecting or waiting for. And that's obviously when Laurie ends up going over to see, because she sees that something's going on and finds that this is the first example of something that becomes quite a trope in the franchise as well, that Michael Myers, although he is a horrible homicidal killer, does weirdly seem to have a bit of a flair for the artistic. So he has organized all the bodies on his sister's tombstone and everything in a little tableau, which I think is
so frustrating. The moment you just mentioned, that kid that she's babysitting.
Yeah.
She literally sees the figure of Michael Myers outside, right? And then Laurie, I think her name is, she just completely forgets the experiences that she's been going through. She has been being stalked across the week or whatever. No, across the day. But then by the afternoon, she completely forgets. And then when the kid sees the figure, she completely disregards it.
I don't think she forgets as much as that she wasn't. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily expect it to be a mass killer. And at this point, it's not like you could say, there's like, because as you point out, there's not a body count or whatever. So she probably just thought it's a creepy, like pervert guy or whatever earlier in the day.
She doesn't even get that impression. She just says to the kid, There's nothing there without even really looking. And if I was to reassure the kids, I can understand. But then have a moment after that where she kind of just is in isolation by herself, and then she has a really like philosophical moment where she just thinks,
I don't think you need that.
Why not? Because it doesn't touch upon the fact that she has been being stalked by this guy throughout the day.
Well, because she's not specifically the only one being stalked; it's everyone. And as I'm saying, even then they don't really see him. That's the point. It's like they could.
She feels like she's the one isolated by the incident because all her friends don't believe her.
Well, yeah, I guess. But even then, like you said, she even points out later in the movie to Tommy to stop talking about the boogeyman and everything because he's scaring Lindsay. And she does kind of go on the phone and talk to people about it. So it's not like she's completely ignoring the potential danger so much as that, like I said, if you in that situation, you would naturally just be trying to convince yourself there's nothing going on. And you wouldn't immediately leap to, oh, there's a mass murdering dude in a mask coming after me, you know?
Yeah, but the thing is, it spends the first 45 minutes doing exactly that. And then for the next 15, it doesn't do it at all. And then when we actually get someone who can kind of believe her, she doesn't believe him. And it makes no sense to me.
I don't see that, but fair enough. I mean, the point is that it's getting you to the last scene, which is like the final girl scene, basically, because she's the final girl of the movie. And she does
all the murders.
Well, they've all happened at this point. You know, I mean, there's not really a lot to say. Like I said, Bob.
I just found it very interesting that they went, of course, the sex scene, and then they actually started the killings with the boyfriend, like some really insignificant character that we just wasn't used to.
It wasn't where they started because, like I said, there's a mention before that there's been people killed off screen that Michael's kind of like mugged or whatever. And obviously you see that he's killed the dog. And the first person that even is killed in terms of the actual residents themselves is Annie when she's going to meet her boyfriend in the car, when she gets strangled outside of her house. So the order of it would be like Annie first, then Bob, then Linda. And then, as you say, I think that's basically the extent of the body count, really, in a lot of ways.
I think the first murder was absolutely the best. Like, it built up for so long. Where he comes out of the closet.
Yeah.
He just comes out of that room.
Moment, yeah.
And, like, if that was, like, another false lead, I would have actually been pissed off. But the thing is, I thought, oh, God, please let this be it. And then it happened. And then I was like, yes! And then it was executed so well. And I thought, thank God they finally gone with it. Because I'm looking at it now. I've got the scene in front of me. And considering it about 5 minutes are credits, right? So that knocks 5 minutes off. So it's a 1 hour 25 film. We only get the first murder or second, whatever, 1 hour and 6 minutes in. So for the next 24 minutes of a hour and 25 film, that's when all the murders are.
Well, yeah,
that's why the lead up is so frustrating for me.
That's the nature of this film. But again, when I get to the audience interaction, I think a lot of people basically disagree with you. And that's
I'm completely wrong. I don't care.
That's what the point of the film is. I mean, in regard to, you could say the same thing about like, why is Psycho a masterpiece if one person is all that gets killed? But that's the point. It's the tension of the moment. But either way, like I said, in terms of, by that point, I would think, I see what you're saying, but I think you're forgetting that it does that cool thing, which, again, it's become a cliche now, but it might have been the very first time you see it, where it's like the woman gets into the car and it's like, oh, is there something going on? Is there somebody in the back seat? And then, I mean, initially you don't see anything happening, and then she turns on the engine and the guy jumps out and strangles her to death. So by that point, you've seen that somebody has been killed and it has started to happen. But then, as you said, that's when it really ramps it up with the whole hiding in the closet and bursting out and pinning Bob to the wall thing, which is really cool. You know, that's like I said, that's the most iconic and famous, I think, killing of the movie. So, and that is one of the ones that I think gets copied almost exactly when Rob Zombie does do the remake in 2007. Because you can't really not do that. So, but no, I mean, like I said, the last part of the movie is very almost, I guess, Terminator-esque in the respect that it's all just Laurie stalked by Myers and doing her best to escape. And as the final girl, maybe she's got virgin powers, and that's why, because she's all innocent and sweet. But I mean, she gets grazed and she's constantly close escaping him. And you get that really exceptionally, like the tense scene of her hiding in the bathroom closet, which I really love, when it actually stops and shows you like her point of view looking through the closet, like the little slits in the blinds or whatever, and seeing him coming, and then he just bursts through to get to her. I really love all that. I think it's fantastic. And again, in terms of brilliantly directed shots, when after that she basically does stab him in the eye with a knitting needle and back in the abdomen with his own knife, and he drops and she thinks he's gone, and then you get that great moment when she's in frame, kind of, catching her breath on the floor, slumped, and he's behind her, and then he just basically bolts upright, still alive, and it's kind of...
The first time that he kind of dies, and then he gets revived, you could say, I can understand, absolutely, because she drops the knife afterwards, after she's supposedly killed Michael. And then that's it, and then she runs upstairs because... he comes back to life, obviously. But then after the whole closing scene, which was fantastic, why did she then just chuck the knife straight back towards him and then go to the door and then sit down? Why did you put the knife by him again?
Well,
after he just came back to life, first of all, even if you killed the murderer, you wouldn't put the knife by the murderer. Yeah. Second of all, you wouldn't put the knife by a murderer who's just survived the murder. Technically murder.
That's just horror movie logic, though, really, isn't it? I mean, you're not wrong. You're absolutely right, and it's frustrating as frick. But again, it's horror movie logic is the kind of, and it's something that when you watch like Scream, it makes fun of all this. Like, you're always going to come back for one more scare, so I'm just going to shoot you in the head because I'm not stupid. I've watched enough of these movies. Why would you assume the person's dead unless they are, and why would you, like you said, leave their weapon handily available and whatever else? So. It becomes to the point where by the 90s people are making fun of these things, which doesn't necessarily forgive them, but I think it's fun looking at it through that kind of cultural lens, at least.
And again, I guess it's also logic, like during the escape, it takes Michael Myers about 30 seconds to just go down the stairs.
Oh, of course.
I mean, it takes so bloody long.
It's ridiculous. Michael Myers, like I said, the films themselves even at some points try to explain, and people don't like it as like, well, he's got to be supernatural because, he seems to be moving too fast and he's pretty much invincible. So, but again, people hate that because it gets into an explanation type thing. So
I get the supernatural vibe because like he does come back from the dead a lot.
Well,
that's the vibe I get. But the thing is, he's so quick in terms of doing these murders. Like, of course, he's lurking and it's all slow. But then when he actually does the murders, he's very quick.
Yeah.
But then he goes really slow again when he's on the pursuit for Jamie Lee Curtis's character, which is really frustrating. But that's the thing. It's everything, I guess.
That's the zombie movie logic, though, isn't it? Where it's like zombies move at 2 miles an hour or something ridiculous. Yet no matter how fast the kind of heroes of the films run, this incredibly slow-moving thing will always be right behind them. Which, again, it's frustrating, but it's become parodied and cliche at this point. I did want to get into the next part quickly, though. I only have a couple of more notes, and I know that you and I both agree that this is a misstep, which is when Laurie takes off the mask and the film actually shows Maya's face. I think that's the only time it's a huge misstep by the director in the whole movie. I don't think you need that. I get that it's probably to point out that, this is just a person. It's nothing, that's scarier. It's just a man. It just looks like a man. But at the same time, none of the other movies do that because they realize it's kind of scarier to keep things hidden and you don't know for sure. I just wanted your sort of thoughts on that and because I think you more or less agreed, yeah?
Absolutely, because I'm just looking at the scene now and the eye is a bit deformed. And
I think it's more that he just looks jammy-eyed, basically.
But to me, I kind of envisioned him as being a really deformed, disfigured person. That's kind of ugly, and that's why they've got the mask on permanently, something like that. So to actually have that revealed, first of all, it's really disappointing because it kind of takes away from it. At least it goes quickly. Like, I think it dwells on the face for maybe a second and a half, 2 seconds, if
definitely,
that. But I just wish it wasn't seen because, again, the supernatural vibe is kind of, it doesn't get lost because straight after you see him again and he's just standing there fine, even though we were just shot in the head. And then, of course, the film ends with him not being there. So obviously he's moving. So the vibe is still there. Yeah. But ultimately, I'm disappointed that you can see him. And I think that's where the 2018 version does quite well because you can kind of see that outline of his left side of his face, but you like the cheek and stuff because he slightly turns his head when the mask is pointed up to him. But other than that, you don't see a thing. you just see his hair, and even in this film, you can see a bit of his hair every now and again. And I think that was enough just to establish that yes, he is a human, so it makes it relatable.
Yeah,
to actually see it, less is more.
Yeah,
is a common thing, and I think it absolutely is in this film.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the whole point is that, I mean, the film even, like I said, takes the time to be like, it's just pure evil. There's nothing there. And so it's much more effective if you, as an audience member, can just imagine whatever you want in any direction. I liken it to the fact that a lot of people were peeved when, and again, apologies if you're not a fan or you haven't seen them, but in Star Wars, basically, when Darth Vader takes his mask off and this thing that's been terrifying because you don't know what it is, just a pasty white guy underneath it, and you're like, oh, that's disappointing.
Stop comparing things to Star Wars.
Well, in this case, it was irrelevant, but in terms of...
it was relevant. I was just saying that exploring the house that's decrepit and old, it's really creepy. Like, imagine going back to your old school right now. And stuff, like your old school is abandoned. Like, have you ever watched Exploring Abandoned Place video on?
Oh, yeah, lots of times, yeah.
They're terrific. And I just think, maybe, like, imagine your childhood house, for example, and imagine it haunted and stuff like that. I think that's a really haunting place. And then you actually visiting a house in this movie, and it's of a murderer. And I think that's terrific. And like, you have all the excellent sound design with like the window smashing, and it turns out to be like the guttering or something, which first of all, really creepy, because you think, oh my God, is Michael there to shoot them or something like that, as he picked up a firearm or something. And then, but the thing is that whole walk through the house reminded me of River Song doing the exact same thing. And that seems creepy. This seems creepy. And I don't know if that's a compliment to The Big Bang. I think it is, because, again, this came first, and this did it superbly.
Well, it's been done in horror films all over the place, but this every one of the sequels gets a lot of mileage out of the Myers house, because, I mean, the whole point of the film is that the tagline is "The night he came home," and that's the only kind of motivation that you can really give him, is that he was just heading back to his childhood home. You know, he hadn't been anywhere else.
I think it would be interesting if we had like a shot of the figure just standing outside the house just for a shot. Because I don't think he actually does go home, technically. He goes to his village, but not to home.
Yeah, well, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure that it's just next to or across the road where he ends up putting like a sister's tombstone and where all the murders happen and stuff. Maybe it's even in the Myers house. But certainly I know in the sequels, and definitely in the most recent one, which I don't want to get too into, it does a heck of a lot with the actual Myers house and the idea of it. And of course, by that point, it's 40 years later. So naturally, people are just living there, you know, without a care, because it's still a house. People still need to sell them, don't they? So, say no more about that. You've already kind of talked about the ending. So, yes, even as a kid, I was kind of like, surely this guy's got to be superhuman. He's just got shot 6 times and got up. But I really love that moment when it's either Laurie or Loomis or both, kind of looks over the balcony and he's just not there anymore. And that's the kind of tense ending. Iconic and brilliant. And related to that, the very last shot of the movie being that the director takes you to everywhere that you've been in the film. So it just quickly flashes to all those locations, but you can hear Michael breathing in the background of every one of those shots, with the implication being that either he could be anywhere or evil is just everywhere and you can't escape. I just think it's a brilliant way to end the movie, and it keeps the tension even at the end, because you're not given the relief of like, and evil is vanquished and everything's fine. It just ends with like, you're not safe. So,
and the breathing being reused every single time, and especially when he's like revived, and like in moments of tension where you don't know where Michael Myers is, you can just hear the breathing. Excellent. Exactly. Excellent decision from the editor or the director or whoever's decision that was.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree. And that's compliments to the sort of sound design doing the work for you, I guess, as well.
The sound design is very hit or miss for me, because I think I touched upon it in the review. It's not just the repetitiveness. Like you mentioned earlier, some sounds are like cartoony. And especially with the car scene, I just think they aren't mixed well. Like they get executed at the same time, but they just sound very cheap. Like it's dated sound, like of metal clanging. It could have been done so much better if you do it nowadays, for example. But that's
it'll probably be more so.
Film or something like that. But
But I do think you have to praise the use of like the wind, for example, in certain moments when it does kind of cut off and gives you that sort of, is he hiding behind bushes and stuff, and it's kind of the wind whistling by you. And in particular, the sound design of, like you said, that it ties his breathing into everything. And then at the very end, it's over the top of everything else. So that's what basically makes that last scene, I think, is the sound editing or the sound design, whatever you want to call it. But awesome. Well, what I'll do, unless you've got anything else that you want to add, I'll jump into the audience interaction section for Halloween 1978.
Before we do this, because I did realize the other day that some people may be thinking, oh my God, these guys aren't giving a conclusion. We will give the conclusion at the end, because I don't think we ever touch upon the fact that we will give the conclusion at the end.
Yes,
and I did notice on our analytics that like 10% of the people that get towards the end actually click off as we announce the audience interaction. So yes, if you stick around, we will be giving our thoughts and I'll wrap up. And then we'll be moving on to Halloween 2018. So do stick around.
Yeah, I did mention it up top, but again, I should have said it at this point. We will get to our own conclusions and a score out of 5, but I just want to talk about the audience interaction, because I think it also feeds into what we're both seeing, because it's weird how the audience interactions are either siding with one of us or the other, but they've come down on both sides, if you know what I mean. It's an interesting little sort of snapshot of that.
I mean, the thing is, our opinions aren't even that far apart. I'm just less lenient on some elements.
When you hear this, you might see what I mean anyway, but I'll get into it and just say it. That the very first person, and this was a back and forth, so apologies. So I responded on a couple of occasions. So this is a thread that was by someone called Rob Birch at Raw Birch, who says, I saw it for the first time ever just last week, and to be honest, I kind of got bored. It takes forever for anything to actually happen, and when it does, it's hardly anything. And there's a few parts that I really don't understand, and from what I've read, you're not supposed to. I also found the soundtrack really jarring and intrusive. It's a great tune, and I like a leitmotif as much as the next guy, but it brought me out of the film more often than not, and it's used to much better effect in Halloween 2018. But I reminded myself constantly that this was done 40 years ago and set the groundwork for 2 generations of filmmakers who built upon and escalated everything as censorship and audiences evolved over time. I suppose it's explained in the sequels, which I've not seen yet, just the 2 Halloweens, but the whole tombstone in the bed thing, why? I appreciate that Myers is intended as an enigma and not everything is supposed to be explained, but I found that a bit much. So yeah, I just basically said it's the tombstone of the sister he murdered that he dug up, it mentions in the film, to which Rob replied, I get that, but why did he go to the trouble of digging it up and dumping it on the bed? And the best response I had was just basically, he's pure evil, but he respects good symbolism. That's the best I can give you, really, you know? But yeah.
I bet you appreciate
it. Yeah. So this is another back and forth, but not with me this time. It's between two of our regular contributors. The first bit was by Mr._G Ward, who says, it's a classic and I watch it every year. I think it's best watched with its sequel as a double bill, as they complement each other really well. And then, pretending it's a crinoid, responded to G Ward and says, sequels that start right where the last one ended are so cool. Shame it doesn't happen often. Like you say, it's a great double bill. I'm pleased by the newest one continuing immediately from the last reboot in the same way. Felt like a love letter to Halloween 2. And then G Ward responds, I've not seen the new ones yet, but I like the fact they did that. Having 2 start immediately allows all the building 1 did to be used to heighten what happens next. And I just quickly said, unfortunately, the original Halloween 2 has been retconned out of existence now, to which G Ward replied, not in my timeline.
He got defensive about it, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, fair play. I mean, it's all different timelines. Let it exist simultaneously if you're happy to. And again, I like the original Halloween 2, but that's a review for another time. At Trekkin10 says, the original is a classic. I'm not a huge fan of the horror genre, but I've always liked Halloween. Must have something to do with the Shatner mask, which I did allude to earlier, but just super quickly for anybody who doesn't know. Basically, the mask that Myers wears in this movie is an old-time Captain Kirk mask from the original series of Star Trek, which has just been kind of devoid of all features and sprayed white. So yeah, if you think the face looks familiar at any point, that actually is a young William Shatner, which does make me wonder if he ever got likeness rights for all these films, but there we go. Set Beard to Stun says, this was the movie that made me love horror. The evil that drives him to do what he does is just there with no real explanation, and it doesn't rely on gore just for the sake of it. It's just creepy and menacing, and I love it.
Nice.
At Matt Stokes just says, horror icon. Fair enough. At Aaron Bossig says, it's a great movie to watch with a few beers and 50 of your closest friends. At Gabe Wolfgang just says one word all in capitals, classic, which at HypnoPeter also says, but then adds a little thumbs up emoji. And at CMH Sean also just says, it's a classic. So simple and to the point, I think. The Ham-Fisted Bun Vendor, great username, says, it's an absolute classic, absolutely love the tone and direction. It works perfectly as the opener to my favourite Halloween film, Halloween 2, the original, of course. So yeah. Just a few more. Matthew Condello says, a classic, tightly paced storytelling that revels in tension and suspense and not gore. It's scary because...
What?
Yeah, I think so. It's scary because there's still a sense of reality about it, and the mask POV helps to build that tension. Excuse me. Michael is predator stalking his prey. That's the scary part, not gore, which I think is cool. Dr. Tocula says, absolutely a classic. And Ramsey Campbell responds, it's a slasher film that Val Lewton might have produced had he lived. It certainly shares his talent for restraint and suggestive reticence, which, again, Val Lewton, a famous horror director working in the sort of 40s. If you haven't seen the original Cat People, it's probably his most famous work. Worth a look, definitely very much a forerunner of a lot of horror. So just three more now. The fourth dimension says it's a seminal classic, but like many other classics, like the Freddy and Jason movies, has seen its power diluted by countless anemic sequels / reboots that have turned the central antagonist into some sort of fan-worshipped anti-hero. Okay. At Mangler112 just also says a true classic. And finally, Danny Owen says a classic, still holds up for me. And then a smiley face emoji.
Okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought. That was a long section.
A lot of people had things to say, but then not as many people chimed in on 2018, so it'll probably make
there were a handful.
The difference. So, do you want to give your conclusion and score first, or would you rather I went first?
Yeah, sure, I'll go first, but I guess I'll do a log line to the conclusion, actually. This is as like a disclaimer, because my score is pretty high. And I feel like a narrative has been built in this episode so far where I may dislike this film. Where
I don't agree.
Absolutely don't.
I certainly wasn't implying that, no.
Yeah, I compliment a lot of elements to this film. And again, the final half hour's excellence can be understated. And again, if I knock some points off my score, then I've got to justify why those points have been dropped, and I feel like I've also done that. So, yes, it's a high score, but it's not perfect, and I've explained my reasons for that. So, that's my disclaimer. But my in-depth review, which is quite long, is this movie very good? Sure. The climax certainly is, though why Laurie threw the knife beside Michael Myers for the second time, especially after the first time he came back from the dead, I just don't know. We've went over that. Positive-wise, it's scary. I found myself filling in the gaps a lot and scare myself during these moments when the director could have just went for cheap, expected scares. Instead, for opting for cheap scares, the movie dragged suspense out for the best part of an hour. I would call this movie the best movie for suspense that I've ever seen. And that's a huge compliment because I don't think I've seen movies hold such suspense for a long time and for so many times across a movie as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, big praise for that. I also think Jamie Lee Curtis was fabulous. She got to play a young, though mature adult, and she played it very well. And I think she's a fabulous actor. I've seen her in other stuff like Knives Out and a couple of other films here and there, and I think she's terrific. And Donald Pleasance offered a reassuring, though pressure rampy-uppy presence, which is how I explained it. Like, yes, he's a reassuring guy. He's a kind person. But he also gets the dramatics really spot on as well. So when the story needs to like up a gear, he can offer that. He's the character that does what you kind of wanted Laurie to do, which is take everything uber seriously and be like, no, don't even give him like an inch because this is pure evil and it will kill you. I didn't want her to take it seriously at all. I just wanted her to consistently acknowledge that this guy has been following her because for the first 45 minutes, she's really paranoid to the point where her friends are mocking her.
Yeah.
And then when she gets to the house, this kid sees this figure, but then suddenly she forgets that she's been stalked the whole bloody day. But that's what I meant. Not.
Well, he does say he's seen the boogeyman and it looks like the boogeyman. He doesn't just say there's a guy. But, either way.
Sure, but it happens many times. But whatever. It has some terrific editing choices, especially with the sound effects here and there that aid the climax to the frights. Negative-wise, I think the film has stayed poorly in the first half hour or so. For example, the carjacking scene falls flat and isn't as scary as I would have liked, especially after the brilliantly eerie sequence leading up to the prison gate. And I also wasn't expecting the true Mr. Myers threat to be delayed for so long, so at times, yes, it did drag for me. Plus, I'm not a fan of the theme music being played every 10 minutes. I'm sorry. I want to watch the whole franchise just to see where they went with this, despite knowing it's not critically acclaimed, as you acknowledge yourself. And I give it a 4 out of 5.
Awesome. Cool.
You, Michael?
My conclusion is just what's left to say about John Carpenter's seminal classic. It's a masterpiece, a perfect film to watch on dark, spooky nights. It arguably kickstarted the slasher genre, though I am aware that Psycho, Peeping Tom, and Black Christmas all came first, but I'd argue they were less successful. This film has a sense of atmospheric dread that's never been bettered, and it created the very first Scream Queen in Jamie Lee Curtis. I adore this film. It has a mass appeal, even my mum loves it, and it just feels eerie and compelling at the same time. Aptly enough, the film is just perfect for dark Halloween nights. Carpenter's best work, in my opinion, and a deserved hallowed masterwork, and I would say 5 stars out of 5. So yeah, the average, obviously, 4.5 out of 5 overall. Halloween 2018, just to give you a quick summary, is 40 years later, and Michael Myers is loose again, and Laurie Strode, who now has a daughter and granddaughter, has spent 40 years of PTSD living with the trauma of the night in 1978 and has to take Michael on again. And that's basically the film in a nutshell.
Pretty much.
The film basically opens with a very kind of, as if you didn't want to know what time this is set in. It's podcasters, true crime podcasters, which I think is going to horribly date this film in future. But yeah, I get it. It's 2018. You need to point that out. I mean, it's nice that they use it logically to explain how and why anyone would be interested in Michael Myers. And yes, if you look at it as if Halloween was real, this was a random person that killed, like we said, maybe 5 or 6 people after killing his sister 15 years before that, and then has spent 40 years in maximum security jail. It's kind of weird, but I do like that, as you mentioned before, there's a couple of really nice scenes that build up the tension, even though these podcasters are stupid as flip, like holding out his mask to him, like, ooh, what are you going to do? And yeah, the whole time I just think they're really dumb. But I don't understand this. It kind of relates to the audience interaction part, this hero worship kind of like, ooh, you want to know what you'll do? Because you know what he's going to do if you have any sense. But again, I guess you kind of have to look at it as, I'm watching this as Halloween 11, and you're watching this as Halloween 2, which probably means that you're less kind of, these people are so stupid, it's obvious what's going to happen. But I was intrigued to know if you did sort of see it like that or not.
No, because I think it's very early established, like, this is 4 years on, first and foremost.
Yeah.
And second of all, because of that time elapsed, it's like a different generation completely. So you have, like, the 3 people walking down the pavement, similar to the first movie, but it's like modern day, and modern day kids, as I'm sure you acknowledge as well, are little shits.
Well,
right?
yeah.
So there's another scene where it's just like kids hanging around and just like taking the piss in terms of the whole situation, not taking it seriously. And unfortunately, that would probably be what has happened, because there's an abandoned house where I live in my village, and it's really creepy, but people just see it as like a joke and like don't see it as like a danger at all, because they're much more toned down to that. So I think the writing is much more realistic in this, with how it writes the characters, and especially during COVID, especially if we're relating it now, like people's not ignorance because they know, but just selfishness, you could say.
Yeah, and kind of if
very well.
Not taking danger seriously enough, because some people are just, I see what you're saying. Like it seems like the survival instinct is missing in a few people, perhaps. So yeah, but I do sort of that is a criticism I have. Not of that moment because I like that's kind of tension. But when Michael does basically make his escape, and again it's getting a little bit forward, but he chases the podcaster two characters down into like a gas station, and I just find that kill to be way over the top with the kind of the goriness of it and the throwing the teeth into the bathroom stall and stuff. I feel like the movie's going for like intensity over atmosphere, and it's like if this is only the second one you've seen, then Myers hasn't really killed in the sort of brutal Terminator are going to tear your teeth out kind of way yet. So it's sort of like what? And
well, the thing is, he bangs his head against the toilet door, so maybe he didn't just pluck the teeth out. Maybe they just fell out.
No, that's fair enough. But again, the fact that he kills him in such a brutal way, it's also worth remembering this is now a 60-something-year-old man. It's like, I'm supposed to believe he's overpowered this like 20-something-year-old podcaster just to the level of that brutality. It's kind of, But yeah, you've mentioned the film itself sort of points out by their dialogue and stuff, people are desensitized a lot more now and they expect a lot more goriness and a lot more brutality. So I suppose at least the film is addressing that.
No, and that's exactly what I want after watching the first one. I want a quicker pace in terms of getting into it, and they absolutely do, because the first time we see him, like, Michael, and I know we see Michael kill his sister in the first movie, like, straight off the bat, but in this film, we literally see, we go straight to the prison, we don't waste any real time, and we get the sequence with, I'm not sure of the actor's name, Jeffrey Hall, or Jefferson Hall?
I don't know who you mean. I'm sorry.
Jefferson Hall, the podcaster guy.
Oh yeah, the guy with the guy.
First of all, bad performance.
I agree. I think they're both bad. I think him and the English actress that's the other one I don't really like. There's a ton of exposition in this. Well, not a ton, but how she delivers it is so wooden. Mm-hmm. It's really wooden. Well, not wooden. It's just like it feels like she's reading off a script. It doesn't feel natural to me. So yeah, the first, the pre-title sequence, you could say, unconvincing, but it does give an interesting like vibe, and it's creepy. Like the whole line, "Don't go across the line," because these people are dangerous and whatever. And it did make me uneasy because it's like, oh my god, what if he turns around and goes for his throat or something, which I expected him to do, but he didn't. Yeah.
And then that was really tense. And then we get to the whole point where he gets the mask up. And then that invokes like a reaction from everyone else, from all the other prisoners, who then slowly descend into madness, which I like as a concept. And I don't think it could have been executed much better. But just seeing mental patients just doing that, it does make me uneasy, but not for like the good reasons in terms of intensity and tension.
Yeah, it seems exploitive almost in a way.
Yeah, and gimmicky, I'd say.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you've said basically there, which is why I'm not just this isn't just me like ignoring you or whatever. I fully agree with everything you've said so far. So nice. I don't really have a comeback because you're right in my mind.
One's nice.
Again, apologies if my notes here are quite rough because I was kind of trying to watch the film with a fresh eye. But I've made.
Don't worry, my notes are I have no notes. So the thing is, in my review, I say there's a plot hole too, but and then I say I'm going to get to it in the review. But then I didn't write any notes and I forgot on the plot holes. But one plot hole, I kind of. Well, it's not really a plot hole. It's just like a convenience. It's where later we get a shot of Michael Myers with a knife, and he's just walking through the streets in a really active street, and then we're meant to believe that no one can see the knife and no one can see him just stalking this woman through the window, even though there's trick-or-treaters all through the streets. So I think
that.
Oh, cool. So that was a problem. There's also a continuity issue that I can't quite remember, and I hope it comes to me, I hope you also mention it if you've noticed that.
I mention it, but yeah.
At the time, it really pissed me off because it was an actual plot hole that didn't make any sense, and it just made the story really easy, and I don't think the writer should have got rid of that, but I can't remember for the life of me, and it's frustrating.
I just want to remind everyone that this is Will who likes this movie better than the original, but never mind.
I literally criticised the other film quite a lot. I praised it a lot as well, But
I'm just joking.
I will get to the positives eventually.
Yeah. No, my point was that I've made kind of notes, but they're not detailed like exact scene by scene. So there might be some scenes that I just haven't made a note about because they weren't notable or things in the wrong order. But don't worry, I have plenty of stuff to say. And if I have jumped over anything that comes to you, Will, or anything, then just shout it out.
Okay.
The next note I've made is just because at this point we're introduced to kind of Laurie and her family. And I do think that, first of all, I like that she kind of has this PTSD, and it's kind of informed her entire life in a way that it hadn't in the previous like reboots and sequels, which Jamie Lee Curtis was in. And yeah, I find that a way more fascinating version of that character and incredibly well played. So I will say this here. Jamie Lee Curtis, the highlight of this film, absolutely. She's a better performance than not only herself in 78, but anybody else in the 78 movie, in my opinion.
Yes. I'd say she's the highlight in the 78 movie, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm not saying otherwise, but at the same time, I still think she's better in this one. But then she's had 40 years of acting to improve, you know?
Yeah, but even 40 years ago, she was still the best thing in that movie, so...
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, there's a reason she became iconic. But yeah, I also find it very interesting that the relationship to her family is kind of like this trauma has led to her being distanced from her daughter, but her granddaughter still wants to have something to do with her. It gives you that interesting dynamic, yeah.
I didn't like the mother just because the mother was portrayed as like a kind of an antagonist, because she kind of gets in the way of the protagonist doing what she knows is right. So that kind of makes her an antagonist because she goes against the lead character, which is frustrating. Not from like a storytelling perspective, but just it makes me frustrated of that character, especially since the writings insistent on keeping her being, in a word, a bitch, basically. But the thing is, I really like how the granddaughter, who by the way is beautiful actress.
But I will say though that I did make this note that I think the three actresses who are playing the three generations of the Strode family, as it were, are again the best part of the movie, and I think all three of them, for me, do a really good job. So that's good. But again, I think Halloween Kills does a lot of favors to certain characters who aren't as well served in this one. And that's all I'll say about that to avoid spoilers. But yeah, again, in terms of continuity errors, but this is one you wouldn't necessarily have known of, there's far too many people in this town that still carelessly dismiss Michael Myers as not a threat. And it bugs me, especially once you've seen Halloween Kills, at which point the entire town seems to be on edge about him, and it's the same night.
Is, by this point, in this film, for a large part of the film, he's still in prison.
No, but I mean, like, once he's out, there is a lot of scenes of people like, oh, there's a threat happening, what's going on? And you get the cool scenes, by the way, fantastic returning actor, the same sheriff, who's like, he killed my daughter, you've got to take it seriously. And yet the current sheriff and everyone's just like, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine, it's not a problem. Which, yeah, on the one hand, it's a 60-something-year-old dude and they shouldn't be frightened. On the other hand, wake up. You know what I mean? There's clearly people are being killed here. You know?
Yeah. And I think you mentioned it, like the gravestone and stuff. I do actually like how they go to the actual grave of the sister in this film as well.
Yes.
And
yeah,
and then you have the cutaways to the actual event going, and then in the background you see like the hand of it was that Michael? I don't believe it was. It could have been. I'm not sure.
There's a couple of moments in both this and Halloween Kills where you're supposed to either assume that it is Michael or any of the other escaped mental patients, and it deliberately doesn't let you know one way or the other. But I think that's on purpose, because it's to kind of put you on edge of like, well, where is he? We don't know if that's even him, which is really cool. I like it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a big positive. This film does really well. And also when Jamie Lee Curtis's character Laurie comes to the restaurant, we can kind of see the embarrassment from the mother, her mother being completely not, I don't want to say but nuts, but then again she has reason to be, because there's a beautiful shot, I think just before, where she sees Michael leave the prison. That might have been after. While we're on this topic, another moment like that is later in the film when the murders are really ramping up again, where there's a sheet over a dead body, and then the sheriff goes to see it, and that's very reminiscent of Michael in the first film, where he's got like the sunglasses on, which is first of all really funny.
They're just eyeglasses, not sunglasses. But yeah, to me, it looked like a ghost costume with Bob's eyeglasses on them.
Yeah, and I just think that's phenomenal. And first of all, it pays homage to the first film, but like just going into a room and then seeing something under this sheet, and every single piece of media I see this kind of trope, you could say, this horror trope. It just works so well, and it freaks me the hell out.
Okay, fair enough.
Does it not for you?
Not entirely, because I'm probably desensitized to it. I'm not going to lie and be like, oh, it's great, but again, I've seen that many different sort of horror movies and type of stuff like that, so I've just kind of become used to it.
It works every time for me.
Yeah, I'm desensitized to a lot of things that might make another person sort of jump or take pause. But believe me, when I was your age and maybe a couple of years younger, I was terrified of everything. So, and this is only, obviously, I've got the audience a little bit into the weeds here, but I'm like twice Will's age, basically.
Oh my God, don't say that.
Yeah, so I've got a lot more experience and time of watching kind of horror movies and desensitizing to them. So I fully understand that I'm not really the audience freshly coming into this, but yeah, there's kind of a couple of things that I wanted to talk about that are, I think, huge moments in the movie as well in 2018, and I'd love your take on it. Okay. And the first one is basically I like the idea that the babysitter, as it were, in this film, which again, paying homage to the original, kind of sacrifices herself to save the little kid. But I also hate that scene because, first of all, I always find it kind of cheap and really unsettling when any movie, especially a horror movie, puts a kid in danger to try and get a reaction out of you. Because for me, it's just the ultimate, like, step too far kind of thing.
I mean, I did like very similar to that. The scene where he's going through the house and then there's a baby. And for the 20 seconds before he gets to the room, you just hear a baby crying and you think, oh no, he's walking towards the baby and then he's going to kill the baby, but then he just kind of stops and stares. Yeah. And I think it gives a much, not much needed, but still a very nice moment of like character for Michael Myers himself, and like a deep dive into his psyche on like whether he would kill the baby, and he didn't.
That's why I hate it, you see, because to me, the character as established wouldn't be forgiving, and it just leaves you with the glaring idea of, well, why is the movie... First of all, I don't want to see any kids getting harmed, so naturally there's a sense of relief at the end of it of like, thank goodness they're safe. But then at the same time, stop trying to humanize Michael Myers, that we're like, oh, well, he has a limit. He wouldn't kill a kid. It's like... No,
I like that because at the start you were mentioning how the movie goes for grotesque and it's like outrageous in some respects, and not like how he kills them. So having that one bit where he does limit himself, I do like.
I think it demystifies and it takes away from the supposed sort of pure evil and everything personally, and it just leaves me questioning, like, why do that?
But that's the reason why I don't think it demystifies, because you saying it demystifies implies that you think that the mystery of Michael Myers has gone away, but you just said yourself you don't know, so it adds more to it adds more to a story that could be explored. But I'm glad that it's not explored, like the equivalent of his face. Like if that's explored more, it makes no sense.
No, it does way too much to humanize him. Like I said, the way you've got to look at it is the way, like I said, Donald Pleasance, and as Loomis was referring to him in the first movie, of like, look, it's just pure evil. You can't reason with it. There's nothing behind the eyes. And then you cut to this movie and it's like, but he won't harm children. I don't want to know his limitations. He shouldn't have any. That's the whole point. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, the moment you start introducing that it becomes not like
I haven't seen Halloween Kills, but is it developed more? I don't think it would have been. And then there he goes, like a little throwaway line. Would you rather the baby be killed just for him to stay true to his character?
No. I'd rather that the movie just doesn't have that scene in, to be honest. Because it's not necessary one way or the other. But again, you don't need it. Like I said, it's the same with the little I disagree. The little African American boy being babysit. It does the same exact trick later on. I think it's trying to make you scared of like, oh, what's going to happen to a child, which I hate anyway because that's cheap. And then secondly, once they are safe, it's just to get the response of like, oh, we're so happy that the kid is safe. But at the same time, like I said, you you don't need those scenes. But again, we probably just disagree on that one. And either way,
yeah. But your point about the original babysitter, she doesn't really sacrifice herself for him, kind of, but she doesn't actually make the conscious effort to be like, no, I'm going to save the kid, so I'm going to die. It's more
I think
like,
she does.
She goes upstairs to go look for the killer, and then she makes a joke to the kid saying, oh, like, someone in here, but then it turns out that no one's in there, as she thinks. Then all of a sudden, she opens the closet, a common thing for Michael, and then suddenly she's just being attacked. So it's not like a conscious effort for... She just says, go get help. So it's not really like...
She's consciously putting herself in harm's way. I read it as being quite selfless anyway.
I don't know. She's trying to escape from Michael. She doesn't want to die. If she's trying to sacrifice herself, then she would be killed for the sake of being killed. But she's struggling. She's trying to get to where the kid is. So I don't read it as that. But we can disagree.
That's definitely how the synopsis on sort of all of the pages reads it, as like she sacrificed herself. And that's how I read it.
Technically, she does, because she dies, but not the kid. But sacrificing yourself implies, to me, the definition to that in my headcanon is characterizing yourself is making a conscious effort to be killed to help another character not be killed.
No, I think it's more that she puts herself in harm's way, as opposed to just like a selfish decision would be, you're on your own, kid, I'm just going to run away. She's like,
but she doesn't. You know? She doesn't believe that there is harm.
She tells the kid that. I don't think you can necessarily know that what she does or doesn't believe. Either way.
No, but she cracks jokes. Like, she literally says all the, oh, get away. And then she like jumps around the corner of the door. And then it's like, oh no, there's nothing there. And she was just making this kid uneasy for the sake of being uneasy. And then she puts him to bed. And then all of a sudden, boom, he's in the closet. And then she's getting killed. And then he runs away. So I don't see it as like making an effort to be killed so the kid can get away.
It's not a huge deal in the movie either way, is it? But yeah, narratively speaking, she dies, the kid doesn't. So
it depends what your definition is for sacrifice. I think that's where we're getting. That's what we're disagreeing.
It's not really relevant. And the next thing that I did want to talk about is the big reveal in the movie of Dr. Sartain, the character's called, sort of being basically a sort of worshipper, I guess, of Myers in that regard, and playing it as a shock reveal of like, oh, he's with the bad guy and he's the one that's that basically is responsible for the escape and pointed Myers in Laurie's direction, because Myers has no particular reason to go after Laurie. He's not overly bothered, basically, which again, I don't like that moment in the movie.
Are you talking about the police car bit?
Well, yeah, he kills, he doesn't. He seems to kill the sheriff, the current day sheriff, the Will Patton character, and then reveals that, I just wanted to study Myers in the wild, and so it was me that's responsible for, letting him out, and it's me that pointed him to Laurie's compound and whatever else. Which, like I said, for me falls really flat, especially if this guy really is a student of Loomis. It's a twist too far. That's just for the sake of being a twist, especially because in story terms, Myers just immediately kills him anyway. So all it serves to do is make it a point that, it turns out Laurie being worried all these years was pointless because he's not even fussed about her. He's only going after her because this dude pointed him in that direction, which is like, that's a bit disappointing. It kills any narrative flow from, tension or anything like that. I mean, I suppose not tension because he would still be a threat and he would still kill you regardless, but it seems really weird that the movie's like, and everything we told you is a lie. So, and either way, like I said, that sort of shock reveal, I don't think you need a reason why he was able to escape or somebody helping him. It just seems like they wanted to give you a shock at that moment.
But even then, how did he help him escape? That still seems a bit cloudy to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's not super clear. It just doesn't fly with me anyway, that big reveal. And like I said, the fact that he's immediately killed anyway just renders it dumb.
I think the way what you just says, it's a twist too far, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a twist you don't really need either way. Yeah. The next notes I have are really just all about because I was watching like the finale at this point, the sort of final face-off in the house and stuff, when at this point, obviously, Laurie has gone sort of full Sarah Connor and prepared traps and got the whole house ready. And again, this is where I have an issue because she shoots off his fingers and everything. And, this dude, he takes a heck of a beating, But again, that's what happens in these films. That's horror films. He gets back.
I just remember the plot hole.
What was it?
One of the plot holes was, there's a remote device to open the underground layer.
Yeah, underground layer.
Every single time they go down there, they always open it, and then they put the remote by the microwave or something like that. They never we never see them take it downstairs with them. So what's stopping Michael just clicking the button to open it at the top? Why does he go through the painstaking effort to rip it up when there's literally a remote there?
Yeah, there's a few moments like that. I noticed something similar, but I can't put my finger on it. But I noticed a similar thing where it's like, well, this trap is terrible because it just didn't work. And it was, again, you've had 40 years to prepare it, and he escapes it really easily by some dumb way that I was like, you didn't think of that, Laurie? Do you know what I mean? It's really stupid.
But in a similar way, I like how we do go through the house at the end, again, similar to the original Halloween, where Laurie just goes around the house, but this time it's her own house.
Yes.
And what I particularly like about this walkthrough is the scene with the mannequins that she was seen shooting earlier.
Yeah.
And that she walks into this room and that they're just there and they're not supposed to be. And first of all, it's creepy because you think one of these could be Michael, or Michael could be hiding in this room, and it's very likely that he is, and of course it does turn out to be him in that room. But so that's creepy in itself. But the fact that he's in her house alone is creepy. But you have that additional element, and you also have the element that he's manipulating things in her own house. So, like, if you walked into a room in your house and you knew someone was in your house, and then they had moved something into a room that shouldn't be there, like toying with your emotions, like it makes you scared of being in your own house, and I think this movie does that so
yeah. It's something that some of the best horrors do, which is to take a place that should be safe and make it scary.
Yes,
that's kind of the whole point. Yeah,
I do like again in the sequence where she goes around all the rooms in her house and like shuts them off with the little locky gates she has in her house installed. So it's kind of like oh shit, I was just skimming through the movie and there was a jump scare, and then I just got scared as I was saying what I was saying.
Don't have it on in the background in the middle of the night, dude.
That scared the crap on me. Yeah, but yeah, like that was a really nice touch, and like the sound effects were really good. And I think the sound effects were less hit or miss in this than the original. I think the sound design was phenomenal in this movie.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And then you also have Michael push her out the window or whatever, and then again, Michael goes to the window, looks down, and then she's not there. So
that's my favorite point. That's my favorite part. I made a specific note of it because it is a direct reference to the end of the first movie, but reversed. So like he's looking for her and she's gone when she lands on the ground. I love that.
There's a lot of moments like that, as you said earlier again.
Yeah, there's a lot of direct copies of the camera setup and stuff, and of like Myers being there behind sheets 1 minute and not, and then hiding behind bushes. And yeah, somebody did a comparison video, which if you get a chance to look it up, maybe do so on YouTube, which is like all the shots that are exactly framed the same way in the two movies. Yeah. And there's quite a lot of them. So, yeah.
Again, it's in this... sorry.
No, go ahead.
As again in the sequence where I make a point about earlier, ironically, it's a negative in terms of how it did it similar. Again, we have another scene of like the granddaughter coming in, who once again beautiful actress. I got
now that you know she's old enough.
yeah, exactly. But she didn't even look under it. She looks like 20. But
no, anytime there's a teenager in movies, they're usually in their 20s. To be fair, at least.
Yeah. Michael's going down the stairs, right? He goes down really slowly again as the granddaughter's downstairs looking for where her mother is. And
she's shouting for her grandma at the time. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and then all the while, Michael is coming down the stairs, but so slow. And it's so frustrating.
There's a lot of moments that frustrate me like that. And again, it's not to take away from the movie. It's not like I'm saying this ruins the movie or makes it bad. But the fact that the entire narrative is building up to like, and we're now so prepared that there's an inescapable trap when they'd already announced a sequel and we know he's going to be fine anyway. I think it makes the end of the movie fall flat because naturally you're never convinced that he's dealt with. So it does kind of like, I think you needed a little something extra there to be like, is there a reason why this is more definitive, or is there at least an extra twist to it, or are you at least going to end on a cliffhanger of some kind? Like they kind of do, but it's a very loose, lame kind of tame cliffhanger, I would say.
I mean, even if I knew there was a sequel coming up, which I did know there was a sequel coming up, I don't think I wouldn't have minded it half as much. Like, I don't think it would have fell flying out, because I think it's a great cliffhanger. I think as a self-contained story, it's phenomenal. And I think it's a great movie. It's not without its flaws, but no movie is.
No.
What I was going to say is, I mentioned it to you after I watched the film. Seeing the promo picture of Halloween Kills, where it literally is Michael Myers walking out of the house that's on fire, it just disappoints me that I knew that when I was watching this movie. Because
I see.
Great, but then at the end, I was just like, well, I know he escapes, so...
Yeah. See, that's the thing. I kind of got that impression anyway, because, well, first of all, they'd announced a sequel even if they hadn't released a trailer or whatever. So I think that was a foolish move to start with, because they announced it was going to be a trilogy. So you knew, like, well, he's not going to be dead at the end of the first one, is he? Which kind of, again, it's not the film's fault, I suppose, as much as the publicity, but it still does leave you kind of feeling, well, so what was the conclusion then,
I guess it gets you hyped for the third and final film. It's like, oh my God, he's...
Oh, yeah. As it builds up, definitely 100%, provided it does actually deliver with that. But again, with these franchise type films, they constantly kill off the Freddys and Jasons and everything, and then just turns out there's no way to bring them back. It's ridiculous, because you have to, like, even Halloween 2 ends without spoiling it in a way that he couldn't possibly, even despite being supernatural and whatever else. At the end of Halloween 2, any rational person thinks, oh wow, Dr. Loomis and Michael Myers are dead. But then when the sequels happen, Halloween 4, which is the more direct sequel to 2, it just disregards this completely and says, no, forget it. They're both alive. But so I just think Halloween 2018 wants you to believe it's got a conclusive ending when everybody knows it hasn't. And if it had just played it as a cliffhanger, I think it might have been improved in that way.
I agree.
Yeah. Fair enough. So that was the only other note I had is basically that I love that John Carpenter came back, and I like his music in this one as well.
That wraps the review up for today. Now moving on to the audience interaction.
We will, by the way, we should add again, we will give our conclusions and start our scores after the audience interaction for Halloween.
And then, of course, we're going to discuss what we're going to be reviewing next time. Well, one of us will be reviewing.
Indeed.
So, audience interaction for this, again, as Michael said earlier, it is a bit scarce compared to the original one, so it won't be long. So, Michael put out a tweet, and this is the Twitter ones. The Fourth Dimension said, thought it was great, jettisoned everything wrong with the other sequels. Michael and Laurie are siblings. Oh, Jesus Christ, that was a thing? What?
It was a huge thing. That's why there's a reference in this movie when somebody says that, and then what's their name? Allison says, "No, that's not true. It was just all made up." But that was the focus of the entire franchise until
I just thought that was like a reference to like the media and like the media manipulation of it. That's interesting. Okay, I don't like that. I guess it could be interesting. I'll see.
It's very interesting, actually. It kind of works.
I can imagine. I watched the films. His superhuman healing powers, even though he should have been dead many times across these two movies that I've watched, but whatever. And return to focus to the victims rather than the killer. Shame Halloween Kill seems to have reversed all that again, though I'm sure you'll disagree with that.
Well, yeah, it hasn't, first of all. I know what he says, because there's slight references in the trailer and in the movie where they go like, oh, the more he kills, the stronger he gets, and it seems to be hinting at a supernatural thing, but again, it never really commits to it, so,
fair enough. And then Tom Sly,
let's say.
That's easier word to say the Twitter handle as opposed to the Twitter name. But Tom Sly says it was all right. Maybe I need to see Halloween Kills to fully appreciate it. Okay, Tom Sly. And then we move on to Facebook. Mr. George White, the Barrowman fanatic himself, said, Jamie Lee is always perfect in these, but I think 2018 allowed her to do more. Best one since 2, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, fully. Yeah.
And then Jay Hildreth said it was okay, but went too much for body count. That's what she said. Over suspense, which is what made the original the masterpiece that it is.
I would very much agree with that, yeah.
And that wraps up the audience interaction. So, a similar question to what you asked me, I will also offer you the chance to give your conclusion first, if you would like to do so.
Yeah, well, I will, just so we can switch it up, because we did the other way around. So we will this time. Plus, my conclusion is a bit longer, so it's probably best not to finish with it. Yeah. My conclusion is just, in conclusion, this film leaves me wondering why it jettisons every other sequel, reboot, etc. It just comes off a bit like a publicity exercise to me. Honestly, I still think the original Halloween 2 is a better movie, and that's a problem for a film that sets itself up as a superior replacement. It even copies some beats from that film, which seems like a bit of a cheat. This film has an overall rather incoherent tone, veering between moody horror, extreme gore, comedy, revenge flick, teen soap opera, and PTSD dramas. But things that shouldn't work often do, though. I heard some people annoyed at the comedic moments when a lot of others were laughing, and I myself found most of them to be some of the best parts of the movie. Additionally, the film takes the idea of using shadows to its extreme, which is often effective, but also comes to a point where several times I literally couldn't make out what I was seeing. There was honestly a murder which I suspect had a gruesome aftermath, but I'm judging it purely on another character's reaction within the film, because all I saw was smudged blurs against pitch black. Yeah, I think it should be possible to give a spooky atmosphere without making your audience literally unable to see what's on screen. But what really works here is the film's subversion of the traditional final girl trope. Far from damsels in distress struggling to survive, the ladies in this film are capable and proactive, although outside of the Strode family, they're still vulnerable teenagers for the Shape to hack his way through. I didn't like the Dr. Sartain reveal, and the movie seems to be playing it as a huge shock, but it just fell flat, as I said. The film's also not really interested in exploring this or anything outside the Laurie versus Michael dynamic, which it turns out to be irrelevant anyway, and just moves on from everything quickly. This is a problem throughout, as characters even disappear from the story, never to be addressed again, leaving us wondering exactly what their fate is and what their purpose was to the story being told. But overall, Halloween 2018 is not bad. I was just hoping to come away from this film with far more glowing things to say. Don't expect gold standard excellence on par with the original, but do see it and decide for yourself what you think if you have any interest in the franchise. And my score for it was 3.5 stars out of 5.
I'm tempted to say oof, but as we know, 3.5 isn't
not a bad score.
Look down on now.
If anybody is interested, by the way, I do have a ranking on my Letterboxd of all of the Halloween films, and Halloween 2018 is currently in 4th place out of 12 movies, so not by any means bad as such.
Yeah, absolutely. My review of Halloween 2018 is, dare I say it, better than the original. A plot hole or two that I'll get into the review, whatever. And an unconvincing performance from Jeffrey Hall aside, this superbly modernizes the classic whilst not repeating past problems from the 1978 movie, one of which being most notably the utilization and variants of the original music theme and score, which I really appreciate, and as we got into earlier. Scarier, tighter, paced better with the introduction to Laurie's granddaughter. Is this the first time we see the granddaughter?
Yeah, because that's the thing. Another reason it's rebooted is because she has a daughter in Halloween 4 through 6, a son in Halloween H2O and Resurrection, and now a daughter and granddaughter who are completely different in these reboots. So,
yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the granddaughter offers a character with a surprising amount of personality, which made me truly root for her, which I think any horror really needs. That's like cool. A protagonist that you can kind of root for their survival as opposed to want them to die. That's not what you want in a horror. Well, maybe you do. I don't know.
Some people do watch them for the actual. I think that's the issue. A lot of people watch some of these for the antagonist and don't care about the protagonists, and it's kind of like, I just want to see how Freddy or Jason up in head will kill this person, and I'm with you. I think it's better if you actually care for them not being killed.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, Michael, you did get confused by this line, but for the people that have a brain, this should be easy to figure out.
Cheers.
I'm joking. I hate horror, but only when it's good. This is why I like to say it here now. I hate horror. And that wraps up my review of Halloween, and I gave it a 4.5 out of 5.
Wow. I'm really happy you liked it that much, to be perfectly honest. Well, given that I bought you the DVD anyway, naturally I would be happier. So hang on, what was your score? 4.5, and mine was 3.5. So naturally the average.
It's very easy averages today.
Halloween 2018 would be 4 stars. So 4.5 and 4 stars. Definitely 2 very good films, I would say. So if you're looking for something to watch this Halloween night, you could obviously do a lot worse than either of these movies that are called Halloween.
So next time, Michael, I will be reviewing alongside regulars, we can call them that now, our first recurring guest on this channel. I can say that for sure. Joe Popart. Wait, what? No, not George Popart. George Popart and Jodie Khan. You can see where I made that mistake. But they'll still be coming back to review June. That'll be released on the 4th of November. And then afterwards, I'm very looking forward to a crossover with the Star Trek podcast.
Yes.
Which we'll kind of get into the weeds of next week at the end of that episode. But actually, no, because you wouldn't be there for that. Do you want to kind of hype that episode up? It's only 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you follow me at all, you'll know that I've been doing a hit or miss Star Trek podcast as kind of a companion piece to this. But Will, not being sort of as knowledgeable of Star Trek, is sort of, he's on as a guest for one, but it's not a co-hosting situation like this. And I only have one episode of that podcast left to go out. As you're listening to this, the newest episode will have just aired, and that's myself and Dominic Martin. And then conclude the series. It's crossover between my 2 podcasts, and so we will be reviewing on both the Star Trek channel and this channel the movie Star Trek 2009, the J.J. Abrams reboot. And that will be myself and Will, of course, as the film hosts, and my friend Stephen Brown, aka Brownie, who was my first guest on the Star Trek podcast as well. So
see you guys next week. See you in a bit.
Bye. Have a safe Halloween, everyone. Take care.